My name is Emma Martinez, and last Tuesday at 2:47 p.m., I watched my older sister Sofia literally collapse to her knees in the marble lobby of Desert Valley Bank. The security guard rushed over thinking she was having a medical emergency, but I knew better. Sofia wasn't sick, she was staring at my bank withdrawal slip showing $3,500,000 in bold black numbers, trying to reconcile it with the memory of mocking me just 1 week earlier for asking to borrow $50. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same sister who had spent our entire lives positioning herself as the successful one, the achiever, the Martinez daughter who made it, was now gaping at proof that her quiet, nerdy little sister had been sitting on more money than she'd see in a lifetime. But this moment didn't happen overnight. This moment was 29 years in the making, built on a foundation of overlooked potential, dismissed dreams, and the peculiar advantage of being perpetually underestimated by the people who were supposed to know you best. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Standing in that bank lobby, watching Sofia's perfectly applied makeup streak down her cheeks as she processed what she was seeing, I realized that sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of timing. Just 7 days earlier, I had been the family disappointment asking for grocery money. Now, I was a multimillionaire making a withdrawal that triggered the bank's high-value transaction protocols and required 3 different managers to approve. My story begins where most stories of invisible success do, in a childhood where being overlooked became a survival skill, and where learning to thrive in the shadows wasn't just a choice, but a necessity. Growing up as Sofia Martinez's younger sister in our tight-knit Mexican-American family in Glendale meant existing in a very particular kind of eclipse. Our modest ranch house on Elm Street had enough room for 4 people but somehow never quite enough space for 2 very different types of ambition to coexist peacefully. Sofia burst into the world 3 years before me with the kind of magnetic personality that draws adults like moths to a flame. Even as a toddler, she possessed an intuitive understanding of how to command attention, how to position herself at the center of any room, and how to make her needs and wants known with the kind of clarity that left no room for doubt. When Sofia wanted something, the entire household reorganized itself around making it happen. When she cried, it was a crisis that demanded immediate resolution. When she succeeded, it became a family celebration that neighbors could hear 3 houses away. I arrived into this established dynamic as the quiet observer, the child who seemed content to watch rather than perform, to listen rather than demand to be heard. This wasn't necessarily a conscious choice in the beginning, some children are simply born with different temperaments, different ways of moving through the world. But what started as natural inclination quickly became reinforced by the family system that had already learned to revolve around Sofia's more dramatic needs and equally dramatic successes. Our parents, Maria and Carlos Martinez, were hardworking people who had built their American dream through sheer determination and sacrifice. Dad spent 30 years as a mechanic at the same shop on Grand Avenue, his hands permanently stained with motor oil and his back perpetually sore from bending over engines. Mom worked at the local credit union, handling other people's money with the kind of meticulous care that comes from understanding exactly how hard every dollar is to earn. They loved us both fiercely, but their love expressed itself differently toward each of us, shaped by their understanding of what we needed and who we appeared to be. Sofia needed encouragement to moderate her intensity, guidance to channel her natural leadership abilities, and frequent reminders that the world didn't revolve around her desires. I needed encouragement to speak up, to take up space, to believe that my thoughts and feelings mattered as much as anyone else's. Guess which type of parenting came more naturally to 2 people who had spent their entire lives working multiple jobs and managing crises? The pattern established itself early and thoroughly. Sofia's kindergarten teacher would rave about her natural leadership skills and social confidence during parent conferences, while mine would mention that I was very bright but quite shy, and suggest that perhaps I might benefit from being encouraged to participate more actively in class discussions. Sofia's artwork would be displayed prominently on the refrigerator, while mine would be carefully preserved in a folder that Mom kept in her dresser drawer, organized chronologically and protected from damage but somehow never quite making it to public display. This wasn't malicious or intentional, it was simply the natural result of Sofia's achievements being louder, more colorful, more immediately impressive to adults who were already overwhelmed with the practical demands of raising 2 children on working-class incomes. When you're juggling 2 jobs and trying to keep a household running, the child who manages their own problems quietly is going to receive less attention than the child who needs constant guidance and celebration. The dynamic crystallized during my 8th birthday party, an event that should have been about me but somehow became another showcase for Sofia's social skills. While I sat quietly opening presents and thanking each guest politely, Sofia appointed herself the party coordinator, organizing games, making sure everyone felt included, and generally ensuring that the party was a rousing success. The adults were charmed by her initiative and social awareness, praising her generosity in making sure her little sister's party was special. I remember watching this unfold with the peculiar detached awareness that sometimes comes to children when they're learning important lessons about their place in the world. My college experience was more solitary but equally purposeful. I spent most of my time in computer labs and study groups, diving deep into programming languages, database design, and emerging technologies that most people had never heard of. While Sofia was learning to navigate corporate networking events and client relationship management, I was building expertise in areas that were about to become extraordinarily valuable but weren't yet recognized as such by the general public. The pivotal moment came during my sophomore year in 2015, when I first heard about Bitcoin and blockchain technology in an advanced computer science seminar. The professor presented cryptocurrency as an interesting theoretical application of cryptographic principles and distributed system design, suitable for academic study but probably too experimental and volatile for practical investment consideration. Most of my classmates dismissed Bitcoin as a curiosity, a digital novelty that might be interesting from a technical perspective but had no real-world value or staying power. The financial media was equally skeptical, portraying cryptocurrency as either a speculative bubble or a tool for illegal transactions rather than a legitimate alternative to traditional banking systems. But something about the underlying technology fascinated me in a way that I struggled to articulate to anyone else. The concept of a decentralized ledger system that could facilitate secure transactions without requiring traditional banking intermediaries seemed like exactly the kind of paradigm shift that historically created enormous opportunities for early adopters who could see beyond present limitations to future possibilities. I spent weeks researching Bitcoin, reading white papers, studying the technical architecture, and trying to understand both the potential applications and the genuine risks involved in cryptocurrency investment. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that this technology represented something fundamentally important, regardless of its current price volatility or limited mainstream acceptance. Using $500 from my web design earnings, I bought my first Bitcoin when it was trading at around $250 per coin. This meant I owned approximately 2 full coins, plus some fractional amounts that I continued to accumulate over the following months as I learned more about the cryptocurrency ecosystem and began to understand how blockchain technology might reshape multiple industries beyond just digital payments. I told no one in my family about this investment. How could I explain to parents who had spent their entire lives working traditional jobs and saving money in traditional banks that I had invested a significant portion of my savings in something that existed only as computer code? How could I justify this decision to a sister who measured success in terms of social recognition and traditional career advancement? Instead, I continued my web design work, continued my computer science studies, and quietly began learning everything I could about emerging financial technologies, investment strategies, and the broader digital economy that was beginning to develop around cryptocurrency and blockchain applications. By the time I graduated in 2018, Bitcoin had experienced several dramatic price swings, reaching nearly $20,000 per coin before falling back to around $6,000. My initial $500 investment had grown to approximately $50,000, representing more money than I had ever imagined possessing. But more importantly, I had developed expertise in an area that virtually no one in my family or social circle understood or even knew existed. While Sofia was beginning her career in real estate, learning to manage client relationships and navigate luxury property markets, I was positioning myself at the intersection of traditional business needs and emerging digital technologies. I took an entry-level position as a software developer at a financial services company, work that appeared modest and technical to my family but gave me access to professional networks and learning opportunities that would prove invaluable over the following years. The contrast in our post-graduation circumstances was stark and exactly what everyone expected. Sofia quickly established herself as a rising star in Phoenix's competitive real estate market, specializing in high-end properties and developing a reputation for sophisticated client service and market expertise. Her social media presence evolved into a professional marketing tool showcasing luxury listings, satisfied clients, and the kind of lifestyle that successful real estate agents were expected to embody. I, meanwhile, was working in a cubicle writing code for financial analysis software, driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and living in a modest one-bedroom apartment near the ASU campus. To external observers, particularly family members who measured success in terms of income, lifestyle, and social status, it appeared that Sofia was thriving while I was simply getting by. What they couldn't see was that I was systematically building expertise and investment capital in areas that were about to experience explosive growth. While Sofia was focused on maximizing her current income and maintaining her professional image, I was making strategic decisions based on 5- and 10-year projections about technological adoption and digital transformation across multiple industries. The family dynamic remained essentially unchanged from our childhood patterns. Sofia's real estate successes were celebrated at family gatherings with the same enthusiasm that had greeted her high school achievements. When she sold her first $1 million property, the family dinner celebration lasted until nearly midnight and included extended family members calling to offer congratulations. When she moved into her downtown condo, our parents spent an entire Sunday helping her decorate and arranging furniture while marveling at the luxury finishes and city views. My professional milestones were acknowledged politely but without much fanfare or detailed interest. When I mentioned receiving promotions or completing major projects, the conversation would typically shift quickly to Sofia's more immediately impressive and understandable achievements. This pattern felt natural and familiar rather than frustrating. I had long since learned to derive satisfaction from the work itself rather than from family recognition or approval. But underneath this surface continuity, something fundamental was shifting. My cryptocurrency investments were growing steadily as digital assets gained broader acceptance and institutional adoption. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I wasn't angry exactly, more fascinated by the mechanics of how attention and admiration flowed naturally towards certain types of personalities and behaviors. Sofia wasn't trying to steal my thunder, she genuinely wanted my party to be successful. And her way of ensuring that success was to take charge and make things happen. The fact that her helpfulness resulted in her receiving most of the adult attention and praise was simply a natural byproduct of her approach to the world. That night, as I carefully arranged my birthday presents in my room, I made one of those childhood observations that would shape my entire approach to achievement for the next 20 years. Sofia succeeded by being seen and heard and appreciated by others. Her victories were public celebrations that brought joy to the people around her. But there might be other ways to succeed, quieter ways that didn't require performing for an audience or competing for limited family attention and resources. School reinforced these emerging patterns while adding new layers of complexity. Sofia excelled in subjects that required presentation and social interaction. She was the star of every group project, the natural choice for student government positions, the student who teachers remembered fondly years after graduation. Her report cards were filled with comments about her leadership potential and communication skills, and parent-teacher conferences became opportunities for educators to gush about her positive influence on classroom dynamics. My academic experience followed a different trajectory entirely. I gravitated towards subjects that rewarded precision and independent thinking, mathematics, computer programming, and later economics and financial analysis. My successes were measured in test scores and grades rather than social impact, in individual achievements rather than collaborative leadership. Teachers appreciated my work ethic and analytical thinking, but their praise tended to be more subdued, more focused on intellectual capability than personal charisma. This suited me perfectly. I discovered early that I genuinely enjoyed the process of solving complex problems, of finding patterns in seemingly random data, of building systems that worked elegantly behind the scenes. While Sofia was learning to navigate social hierarchies and influence group dynamics, I was developing what would later become extraordinarily valuable skills in analysis, strategic thinking, and independent decision-making. The computer lab became my sanctuary during middle school, a place where success was measured by what you could build rather than how confidently you could present it. While my classmates saw programming as boring or too difficult, I found it meditative and empowering. There was something deeply satisfying about writing code that solved real problems, about creating digital solutions that worked exactly as intended without requiring anyone's approval or appreciation. My first real taste of financial success came during high school, though nobody in my family understood its significance at the time. I had started doing basic web design for local businesses, charging modest fees to create simple websites and online presences for small shops and service providers who were just beginning to understand that they needed some kind of digital footprint to remain competitive. The work came naturally to me, combining my programming skills with an intuitive understanding of how to present information clearly and attractively. More importantly, it was work that I could do independently, on my own schedule, without requiring anyone else's permission or oversight. By my junior year, I was earning several $100s per month from various web design projects, money that I quietly saved while my family assumed I was just spending a lot of time on computer homework. Sofia, meanwhile, was collecting traditional high school accolades with impressive efficiency. She was elected to student council, chosen for the homecoming court, and awarded a scholarship to Arizona State University based on her leadership activities and community service. Our parents were justifiably proud, and our extended family treated her college acceptance like a major family victory. The celebration dinner at Casa Esperanza lasted 3 hours and included cousins driving in from Tucson to congratulate the first Martinez to receive a 4-year college scholarship. When my own college acceptance letters arrived the following year, they were met with pleasant but significantly more subdued approval. I had been accepted to ASU's computer science program with a partial academic scholarship, an achievement that was certainly celebrated but somehow felt smaller in comparison to Sofia's more visible social and leadership accomplishments. The family dinner to celebrate my acceptance lasted about 45 minutes and included only immediate family members. This disparity in celebration wasn't particularly painful because I had already learned to derive satisfaction from the work itself rather than from external recognition. I was genuinely excited about studying computer science, about diving deeper into programming and systems analysis, about exploring the emerging field of digital commerce that was just beginning to reshape how businesses operated. The subdued family response to my acceptance actually felt appropriate. This achievement was about my internal development rather than our family's public reputation. College amplified all of these established patterns while introducing new variables that would ultimately change everything. Sofia threw herself into campus life with characteristic enthusiasm, joining sororities, participating in business club activities, and building the kind of extensive social network that would later serve her well in real estate. Her Instagram feed from college years showed an endless stream of parties, formal events, spring break trips, and networking opportunities that positioned her as someone who was going places and meeting all the right people along the way. My professional expertise in blockchain technology and financial software was becoming increasingly valuable as traditional companies began exploring digital transformation initiatives. Most importantly, I was developing the kind of strategic thinking and market analysis skills that would allow me to identify and capitalize on emerging opportunities long before they became obvious to mainstream investors. By 2020, my Bitcoin holdings alone were worth over $800,000, and I had diversified into other cryptocurrencies, tech startups, and early-stage companies developing blockchain applications for various industries. I was living below my means, reinvesting most of my gains, and quietly building the kind of substantial wealth that creates genuine financial independence rather than just improved lifestyle options. Sofia, despite her apparent success and professional recognition, was actually struggling with the financial pressures that came with maintaining her high-profile real estate career. The luxury condo, the leased BMW, the designer clothes, and the client entertainment expenses were consuming most of her income, leaving her perpetually cash poor despite earning significant commissions. The 2020 real estate market disruption had reduced her income substantially while her fixed expenses remained high. None of this was visible to our family, who continued to see Sofia as the successful daughter and me as the one who was doing fine but not particularly ambitious or achievement-oriented. The perception gap between reality and appearance was widening every month, but I had no particular desire to correct these misunderstandings. I was content to continue building wealth quietly while letting Sofia maintain her position as the family's success story. This careful balance might have continued indefinitely if not for the emergency that brought everything into sharp focus and created the circumstances that would ultimately expose the true nature of our respective financial situations. The Martinez family operated on unspoken rules that had crystallized over decades of shared meals, celebrations, and crises. Everyone had their designated role, their expected contribution to family harmony, and their understood place in the complex web of relationships that bound us together. These roles weren't assigned through explicit conversation or conscious decision-making. They evolved organically from our personalities, our needs, and the practical demands of maintaining family cohesion in a household where resources were limited and emotional energy had to be distributed carefully among competing priorities. Sofia's role was the achiever, the ambassador, the family member whose successes reflected well on all of us and whose failures would be felt as collective disappointments. This position came with significant privileges, priority access to emotional support during difficult times, enthusiastic celebration of accomplishments, and the assumption that her needs and ambitions deserved serious consideration from everyone else. But it also carried substantial pressure to maintain appearances, to justify the family's investment in her success, and to shoulder the burden of representing our entire clan in professional and social situations where first impressions mattered. My role was the steady one, the child who didn't require much attention or intervention, the family member who could be counted on to manage her own problems without creating additional stress for parents who were already stretched thin. This position offered the freedom to pursue independent interests without external interference, the luxury of making mistakes without public scrutiny, and the valuable opportunity to develop self-reliance and internal motivation. But it also meant being overlooked during important moments, having achievements dismissed as less significant than Sofia's more visible successes, and learning to find validation from sources outside the family structure. Our parents had adapted their parenting styles to accommodate these established roles in ways that reinforced existing patterns while obscuring the underlying inequities. Mom had developed a particular way of talking about each of us that reflected her understanding of our different needs and capabilities. When discussing Sofia with relatives or neighbors, her voice would fill with pride and maternal satisfaction as she recounted recent accomplishments, career milestones, and social achievements. When the conversation turned to me, her tone would become gentler but also more tentative, as if she weren't entirely certain what to highlight or how to position my quieter successes in terms that would resonate with her audience. Dad's approach was more subtle but equally revealing. He would beam with obvious pride when Sofia brought boyfriends home for family approval, when she received professional recognition, or when she made decisions that aligned with traditional markers of adult success. With me, his pride was quieter and more concerned, focused on my character and work ethic rather than on specific achievements that he could easily explain to his coworkers or extended family members. He worried about my social life, my romantic prospects, and my apparent contentment with a lifestyle that seemed modest compared to Sofia's more ambitious trajectory. The extended family had absorbed these dynamics and reinforced them through their own interactions with us. Aunts and uncles would ask detailed questions about Sofia's real estate career, her relationships, and her future plans, engaging with her as a fellow adult whose experiences and opinions were worthy of serious consideration. Their interactions with me were warmer but more superficial, focused on general well-being rather than specific accomplishments, treating me more like a younger family member who hadn't quite reached full adult status despite being nearly 30 years old. This differential treatment wasn't motivated by favoritism or conscious bias, it was the natural result of Sofia's personality and achievements being more immediately accessible and impressive to people who valued traditional forms of success. Her career involved activities that everyone could understand and appreciate, selling beautiful homes to wealthy clients, attending glamorous industry events, and building a professional reputation based on social skills and market knowledge. Her accomplishments were visible, measurable, and easily translated into terms that made sense to family members who had spent their lives in conventional jobs. My work in software development and cryptocurrency investment was more abstract and difficult to explain to people who had limited experience with technology and financial markets. When family members asked about my job, I learned to provide simplified explanations that focused on basic functions rather than technical complexities or strategic implications. Rather than attempting to educate them about blockchain technology or digital asset management, I would describe my work as computer programming or financial analysis, terms that were vague enough to be acceptable without being specific enough to generate follow-up questions. The social events where these dynamics played out most clearly were our regular Sunday family dinners at my parents' house, gatherings that had maintained the same basic structure for as long as I could remember. We would arrive around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, with Sofia typically making a dramatic entrance in whatever luxury vehicle she was currently driving, her outfit carefully chosen to project success and sophistication. I would arrive in my practical Honda Civic, dressed in comfortable but unremarkable clothes, carrying homemade dessert or a bottle of wine that cost less than Sofia's designer handbag. The afternoon would unfold according to familiar patterns that reinforced everyone's understanding of our respective positions within the family hierarchy. Sofia would hold court in the living room, regaling everyone with stories from her professional life, updates on her romantic relationships, and plans for upcoming vacations or social events. Her narratives were always engaging and well-constructed, filled with interesting details about wealthy clients, industry gossip, and the kind of lifestyle elements that provided vicarious excitement for family members whose own lives were more routine and predictable. I would typically help Mom in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and preparing side dishes while listening to the animated conversation flowing from the other room. This positioning was both practical and symbolic. I genuinely enjoyed cooking and found the repetitive tasks meditative, but my kitchen location also placed me outside the main social dynamic where Sofia commanded attention and admiration. From the kitchen, I could observe the family interactions without being expected to compete for conversational space or to match Sofia's dramatic storytelling abilities. When the conversation did turn to my life and activities, it followed predictable patterns that reflected everyone's assumptions about my personality and priorities. Family members would ask polite questions about my work, my health, and my general contentment, but these inquiries lacked the detailed interest and enthusiastic follow-up that characterized their engagement with Sofia's more exciting updates. If I mentioned professional achievements or personal milestones, the response would be supportive but brief, with the conversation quickly returning to Sofia's more compelling narratives about luxury properties and high-stakes business negotiations. The gift-giving traditions around birthdays and holidays provided another window into these established family dynamics. Sofia's presents were typically more expensive and carefully chosen to reflect her sophisticated tastes and lifestyle aspirations. Family members would spend considerable time selecting items that matched her aesthetic preferences and social status, often consulting with each other to coordinate purchases and ensure that their gifts would be appreciated and potentially displayed. In her beautiful condo, the unwrapping process would become a small celebration in itself, with everyone gathering around to admire each item and to appreciate Sofia's gracious reactions. My gifts were thoughtful but more practical, reflecting the family's understanding of my modest lifestyle and presumed priorities. I would receive comfortable clothes, books, kitchen gadgets, or small electronics, items that were genuinely useful but that didn't require significant financial investment or careful aesthetic consideration. The gift-giving process was warmer, but more routine, lacking the ceremony and collective admiration that accompanied Sofia's present opening experiences. These patterns extended into how family members discussed us with people outside our immediate circle. Sofia was presented as the family success story, the daughter who had exceeded expectations and was building the kind of impressive life that reflected well on our parents' child-rearing abilities. Her achievements were shared with pride during casual conversations with neighbors, coworkers, and extended family members who appreciated hearing about young people who were thriving in competitive professional environments. I was described more protectively, with family members emphasizing my good character and steady nature rather than specific accomplishments that might impress outsiders. The implicit message was that I was a lovely person who was doing fine in her own quiet way, but that my path was more modest and less remarkable than Sofia's trajectory toward obvious success. This framing was meant to be supportive and affectionate, but it also reflected the family's genuine uncertainty about how to position my achievements in terms that would resonate with their social networks. The romantic relationship expectations placed on each of us provided another illustration of these entrenched dynamics. Sofia's dating life was treated as an important family concern, with everyone invested in her choice of partners and the potential for relationships that might lead to marriage and children. Her boyfriends were welcomed into family events and evaluated as potential long-term additions to our extended network. David, her current boyfriend, had been absorbed into family gatherings with enthusiasm and was already being treated as a prospective son-in-law whose career prospects and family background were subjects of legitimate family interest. My romantic life was discussed more tentatively and with greater concern about my happiness and social adjustment than about the quality or potential of specific relationships. Family members would ask gentle questions about whether I was dating anyone, whether I felt lonely, and whether I might benefit from their efforts to introduce me to suitable men within their extended social networks. The underlying assumption was that my quiet nature and modest lifestyle might make it difficult for me to attract and maintain relationships without family assistance and encouragement. The career advice and professional guidance offered to each of us reflected these same underlying assumptions about our respective capabilities and limitations. Sofia received enthusiastic support for her ambitious goals, with family members offering networking connections, celebrating her professional achievements, and assuming that her success trajectory would continue upward indefinitely. When she faced challenges or setbacks in her real estate career, the family response was to offer emotional support and practical suggestions for overcoming temporary obstacles that were preventing her from reaching her full potential. The professional guidance directed toward me was more cautious and protective, focused on ensuring my stability and security rather than on encouraging ambitious growth or risk-taking. Family members would suggest that I consider more social careers that might provide better opportunities for meeting people and building relationships. They worried about my contentment with work that seemed isolating and technical, wondering whether I might be happier in fields that offered more human interaction and conventional markers of professional advancement. These established family dynamics created a complex emotional environment where love and support were abundant but distributed unequally based on everyone's understanding of our different personalities and needs. This structure provided tax advantages and liability protection while also obscuring the true scale of my financial involvement from casual scrutiny. The psychological challenge of maintaining this secrecy was more complex than simple discretion about personal finances. Every family conversation about money, every expression of concern about my modest lifestyle, every assumption about my limited resources required me to navigate carefully between outright deception and truthful but incomplete disclosure. I had become expert at redirecting conversations away from specific financial topics while still participating warmly in family discussions about everyone's general well-being and future plans. The strain was most apparent during family emergencies or financial crises when my inability to help immediately and substantially seemed inconsistent with my family's understanding of my character and values. When Dad needed expensive dental work that wasn't covered by insurance, I had to contribute modestly while watching my parents struggle with payment plans and borrowed money. When Mom's car broke down and required major repairs, I offered to help with a small portion of the costs while knowing that I could have easily purchased her a new vehicle without affecting my overall financial position. These moments created internal conflicts between my desire to help my family and my commitment to maintaining the privacy boundaries that protected both my investments and my family's assumptions about our relative financial positions. Revealing the full extent of my wealth would inevitably lead to complicated discussions about money management, investment strategies, and family financial planning that would fundamentally alter our relationships and create new pressures and expectations that none of us were prepared to handle. The secrecy also protected Sofia from the knowledge that her younger sister had already achieved a level of financial success that exceeded her most ambitious goals. Sofia derived significant self-worth from her position as the family's primary achiever, and learning that I had quietly surpassed her financial accomplishments might damage her confidence and motivation in ways that would ultimately harm her career and personal development. Our family dynamics depended partly on everyone maintaining their established roles, and dramatic revelations about hidden success could destabilize relationships that had taken decades to develop. The business relationships I had developed through Solano Digital Solutions existed in a completely separate social sphere from my family life, creating another layer of complexity around maintaining consistent personal narratives across different contexts. My business partners and clients knew me as a sophisticated investor and strategic consultant whose insights commanded substantial consulting fees and whose recommendations influenced significant financial decisions. This professional identity was built on demonstrated expertise and successful track record rather than on social connections or inherited family status. The contrast between these professional relationships and my family interactions was sometimes surreal. During the week, I might participate in high-stakes strategy sessions about cryptocurrency market trends or blockchain implementation timelines, offering analysis that would influence millions of dollars in business decisions. On weekends, I would sit quietly at family dinners while relatives expressed gentle concern about my career prospects and suggested that I might benefit from more ambitious professional goals. My physical living situation had been carefully chosen to maintain consistency with family expectations while providing the practical infrastructure needed to manage substantial investments and business operations. The modest apartment near ASU campus looked unremarkable from the outside but was equipped with sophisticated technology systems, multiple high-resolution monitors, enterprise-grade internet connectivity, and advanced security measures that protected both digital assets and sensitive business information. The furniture and decor were deliberately simple and inexpensive, creating an environment that reinforced family assumptions about my modest lifestyle while actually providing exactly the kind of focused work environment that suited my personality and professional needs. The absence of luxury goods or status symbols wasn't motivated by frugality but rather by the strategic decision to avoid attracting attention or questions about income sources that would be difficult to explain without revealing information I preferred to keep private. The vehicle situation provided another example of this careful balance between practical needs and public perception. The 10-year-old Honda Civic was reliable, efficient, and completely unremarkable, exactly the kind of car that family members expected me to drive based on their understanding of my financial circumstances. But it was also deliberately chosen for its reliability and low maintenance requirements, qualities that mattered more to me than status or luxury features that would have complicated my efforts to maintain consistent lifestyle appearances. The psychological preparation for eventually revealing my financial success had become an ongoing background process as I considered various scenarios that might necessitate disclosure. Family emergencies that required substantial financial resources, investment opportunities that might benefit multiple family members, or major life changes that would make continued secrecy impractical could all create circumstances where honesty would become more important than privacy. I had developed detailed mental frameworks for how such revelations might unfold, considering the likely reactions from different family members and the potential long-term consequences for our relationships. Sofia would probably experience some combination of shock, admiration, and competitive pressure as she processed the information and adjusted her understanding of our relative achievements. My parents would likely feel proud but also concerned about the risks involved in unconventional investments, and possibly guilty about having underestimated my capabilities and ambitions. The extended family response would probably depend largely on how the information was presented and whether my success was framed as lucky speculation or as the result of expertise and strategic planning. The difference between being seen as someone who had made fortunate investment choices and being recognized as someone who had developed genuine financial acumen would significantly affect how relatives and family friends interpreted and responded to the revelation. The business implications of family disclosure were equally complex because my professional relationships and investment strategies had been developed independently of family connections or social networks. Revealing my wealth would inevitably lead to requests for financial advice, investment opportunities, and business partnerships that could complicate both family relationships and professional boundaries. The responsibility of managing other people's money, particularly family members' savings, carried risks and pressures that I preferred to avoid. The timing considerations around potential disclosure were becoming more pressing as my wealth continued to grow and as family circumstances evolved in ways that made continued secrecy increasingly difficult to maintain. Sofia's financial pressures were creating situations where my inability to help substantially seemed inconsistent with family values and mutual support expectations. My parents' aging and potential future health or financial needs might require resources that would be impossible to provide without explaining my actual capabilities. The market conditions in cryptocurrency and technology investments were also reaching levels where my portfolio value fluctuated by amounts that exceeded most people's annual incomes. Managing these substantial assets required increasing amounts of time and attention, making it harder to maintain the appearance of someone whose primary focus was a modest software development career rather than sophisticated wealth management and business development activities. The incident that crystallized my understanding of family dynamics and my place within them occurred during the summer I turned 11, a period when childhood awareness begins shifting toward more sophisticated understanding of adult relationships and social hierarchies. Sofia was 14 that summer, navigating the complex territory between childhood and adolescence with the kind of dramatic intensity that characterized all her transitions. I was still young enough to believe that family relationships were fundamentally fair and that everyone's contributions would be recognized and valued equally, assumptions that were about to be tested in ways that would reshape my approach to achievement and recognition for the rest of my life. The setting was our annual family participation in the neighborhood science fair, an event that brought together kids from several blocks around our area to showcase projects and experiments in a friendly competition that emphasized learning and creativity over serious academic evaluation. The science fair was organized by Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired teacher who lived 3 houses down from us and who had made it her mission to encourage intellectual curiosity among the local children through hands-on learning experiences that supplemented whatever they were getting in school. I had been working on my project for weeks, ever since Mom had mentioned that Mrs. Rodriguez was organizing the fair and thought it would be good for both Sofia and me to participate. While Sofia had initially shown little interest in what she considered a nerdy activity beneath her social status as an 8th grader, I had immediately begun brainstorming ideas that would allow me to explore questions that had been fascinating me during my recent discovery of basic computer programming and digital logic. My project focused on creating a simple computer program that could solve mathematical puzzles, specifically finding patterns in number sequences and predicting the next values based on various algorithms. This was ambitious work for an 11-year-old, requiring me to learn programming concepts that weren't typically taught until high school or college, but I had discovered that I genuinely enjoyed the challenge of making computers perform complex tasks through careful logical instructions. I spent my after-school hours and weekend mornings in the local library, checking out books about programming languages and computer science fundamentals. The librarian, Ms. Chen, had taken special interest in my project and helped me locate resources that explained complex concepts in terms that I could understand and apply. Through trial and error, I had managed to write a program that could identify arithmetic and geometric progressions in number series and predict subsequent values with reasonable accuracy. The programming work was done on the family computer, an older desktop machine that Dad had purchased for homework and basic household tasks. I had to share access with Sofia, who used it primarily for social networking and school assignments, but I had learned to work efficiently during the early Morning hours when the computer was available and the house was quiet enough for me to concentrate on complex logical problems. The visual presentation component of my project consisted of printouts showing the program code, examples of number sequences that it could analyze, and predictions that it had generated along with explanations of the mathematical principles involved. I had also prepared a live demonstration where I could input new number sequences and show how the program would process them in real time, though this required access to the computer during the actual fair presentation. Sofia's approach to the science fair was more characteristic of her personality and social priorities. Initially resistant to participating in what she saw as an uncool activity, she had eventually decided to create a project about the psychological effects of color on mood and behavior, a topic that allowed her to incorporate elements of art, fashion, and social interaction that matched her interests and strengths. Her research had involved conducting surveys among her friends and classmates about their emotional responses to different colors, creating visually appealing charts and graphs that displayed her findings, and developing a presentation that showcased her natural communication skills and social confidence. The project was well executed and professionally presented, exactly the kind of work that impressed adults and demonstrated Sofia's ability to manage complex tasks while maintaining high aesthetic standards. The evening before the science fair, as I was making final preparations for my presentation and double-checking my program code for any potential errors, Sofia approached me with what seemed like genuine interest in my work. She had been watching me practice my demonstration and asked detailed questions about how the program functioned, what mathematical principles it used, and how I had learned to write such sophisticated code without formal training. I was thrilled by her attention and curiosity, interpreting her questions as sisterly support and perhaps even admiration for my technical accomplishments. I explained everything I had learned about programming logic, mathematical pattern recognition, and the specific algorithms that allowed my program to analyze and predict number sequences. Sofia listened attentively, asked follow-up questions that demonstrated real understanding, and even suggested ways that I might improve my presentation to make the technical concepts more accessible to judges who might not have programming backgrounds. Her engagement was so encouraging that I shared my most ambitious ideas about potential future developments of the project, including possibilities for expanding the program to handle more complex mathematical relationships and applications that might have real-world utility in fields like financial analysis or scientific research. Sofia's enthusiasm seemed genuine, and I went to sleep that night feeling more confident about my project and grateful for her unexpected support and encouragement. The morning of the science fair dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the outdoor event that Mrs. Rodriguez had organized in the local park. Families from throughout the neighborhood arrived with their children's projects, creating a festive atmosphere that combined intellectual achievement with community celebration. Tables were arranged in rows across the park's main lawn area, with each participant assigned space to display their work and interact with judges and visitors who would circulate throughout the morning. I set up my presentation carefully, arranging the printed materials in logical sequence and preparing the laptop computer that Dad had agreed to let me borrow for the live demonstration component. Everything was working perfectly, and I felt ready to explain my project to anyone who showed interest in understanding how computer programming could be used to solve mathematical problems. Sofia thrived in this attention-rich atmosphere, drawing energy and motivation from family enthusiasm while also feeling pressure to justify their investment in her success. I had learned to find satisfaction and validation from other sources, while still appreciating the warmth and security that came from belonging to a close-knit family that cared deeply about my well-being. The unspoken competition between us was more complex than simple sibling rivalry because it was embedded within these broader family structures and expectations. Sofia wasn't trying to diminish my achievements, she genuinely wanted me to be happy and successful in whatever ways suited my personality and capabilities. But her natural inclination toward performance and attention-seeking meant that family gatherings often became showcases for her accomplishments, leaving limited conversational space for my quieter updates and more abstract professional developments. I wasn't consciously competing with Sofia because I had learned early that our paths were fundamentally different and that attempting to match her social and professional visibility would require me to become someone I wasn't. Instead, I had developed parallel measures of success that didn't depend on family recognition or approval, finding satisfaction in work that challenged me intellectually and in financial achievements that provided genuine security and independence. But the cumulative effect of decades spent in these established roles was that everyone in the family had developed fixed ideas about our respective capabilities, limitations, and likely futures. Sofia was the one with unlimited potential who might achieve anything she set her mind to accomplish. I was the one who would probably be fine in a quiet, stable way but who shouldn't be expected to surprise anyone with dramatic achievements or ambitious victories. These assumptions were so deeply embedded in family conversations and interactions that they had become invisible to everyone except me. From my position as the overlooked observer, I could see clearly how these dynamics shaped everyone's expectations and responses, but I had learned that attempting to challenge or correct these perceptions would require more emotional energy than the effort was worth. It seemed easier and more productive to continue building my own version of success while allowing the family to maintain their comfortable understanding of who we each were and what we were likely to accomplish. The weight of carrying $3.7 million in digital assets while pretending to struggle with basic expenses had become a peculiar form of psychological endurance test. Every family gathering, every casual conversation about money, every moment when relatives expressed concern about my financial stability required me to maintain careful emotional distance from information that would completely reframe their understanding of my circumstances. The secrecy wasn't motivated by a desire to deceive my family, but rather by the practical impossibility of explaining cryptocurrency wealth to people who barely understood traditional investing and who would inevitably worry about the risks involved in such an unconventional financial strategy. My investment portfolio had grown through a combination of strategic timing, careful research, and the kind of patient long-term thinking that came naturally to someone who had always preferred delayed gratification to immediate rewards. The initial Bitcoin purchase had been followed by systematic acquisitions of Ethereum, Litecoin, and several smaller cryptocurrencies that I had identified through technical analysis and market research. As the digital asset space matured and gained institutional acceptance, my holdings had appreciated far beyond anything I had initially imagined possible. But the portfolio extended beyond cryptocurrency into more traditional but equally strategic investments in technology startups, blockchain development companies, and early-stage ventures that were positioned to benefit from the broader digital transformation of business and commerce. I had leveraged my technical background to identify companies whose underlying technology and market positioning suggested significant growth potential long before they attracted mainstream investor attention. My professional life had evolved in parallel with these investment successes, though in ways that remained largely invisible to my family and social circle. The modest software development position had become a launching pad for consulting relationships with companies that needed expertise in blockchain integration and digital financial systems. I was now co-owner of a specialized consulting firm that helped traditional businesses navigate the complexities of digital transformation, work that was both intellectually satisfying and financially lucrative. The consulting business operated under the name Solano Digital Solutions, a deliberately generic title that didn't reveal the specialized nature of our work or the high-value clients who relied on our expertise. Our team consisted of 3 partners, each bringing complementary skills in technology development, financial analysis, and strategic planning. Our client base included regional banks exploring cryptocurrency integration, real estate companies investigating blockchain property management systems, and investment firms seeking guidance on digital asset allocation strategies. My role in the company was primarily analytical and strategic, focusing on market research, risk assessment, and the development of implementation frameworks that allowed traditional businesses to adopt digital technologies without exposing themselves to unnecessary volatility or regulatory complications. This work required deep understanding of both technological capabilities and business requirements, exactly the kind of interdisciplinary expertise that I had been developing since college through seemingly unrelated experiences in programming, financial analysis, and independent research. The irony of my situation was becoming more pronounced as time passed and my wealth continued to accumulate. While Sofia struggled with the financial pressures of maintaining her high-end real estate career, I was earning more from investment appreciation in typical months than she made from her most successful property sales. While she worried about market fluctuations affecting her commission income, I was diversifying across asset classes and geographic markets in ways that provided both growth potential and downside protection. The cryptocurrency holdings alone were worth more than most people would earn in their entire careers, but they were distributed across multiple platforms and wallet systems in ways that prioritized security and diversification over convenience. I maintained detailed records of every transaction, every wallet address, and every private key, but this information was stored in encrypted formats that would be meaningless to anyone who didn't understand digital asset management. To external observers, my investment activities looked like a hobby interest in technology rather than a sophisticated wealth-building strategy. The traditional investments were structured through legal entities and brokerage accounts that provided additional layers of privacy and protection. Solano Digital Solutions held significant stakes in several promising startups, investments that had been made through the company rather than in my personal capacity. Sofia's success confirmed existing expectations about her potential, while my work was viewed through the lens of predetermined assumptions about my capabilities and likely trajectory. The lesson wasn't that hard work and genuine achievement were meaningless, but rather that recognition and advancement depended on factors beyond technical competence or innovative thinking. Presentation skills, social confidence, and the ability to position work within frameworks that others could easily understand and appreciate were often more important than the underlying quality or sophistication of actual accomplishments. This understanding fundamentally altered my approach to achievement and recognition, leading me to focus on developing expertise and building success through channels that didn't depend on family approval or social validation. If my contributions were going to be overlooked or appropriated regardless of their merit, then perhaps the solution was to create value in contexts where recognition was based on results rather than presentation, where technical competence was more important than social skills, and where success could be measured objectively rather than through subjective assessment by people who might not understand or appreciate the work involved. The period following the science fair betrayal marked the beginning of my conscious development as an independent thinker and strategic planner, though I wouldn't have described it in those terms at the time. What felt like natural curiosity and preference for solitary activities was actually the foundation of an approach to learning and achievement that would ultimately provide advantages that no one in my family could have anticipated. While Sofia continued to excel in social and public-facing activities that brought immediate recognition and family celebration, I was discovering entire worlds of knowledge and opportunity that existed outside traditional academic structures and social validation systems. The first area of exploration that captured my sustained attention was computer programming, specifically the challenge of making machines perform complex tasks through carefully constructed logical instructions. The family computer, despite its limitations and shared usage requirements, became my window into understanding how digital systems functioned and how creative problem-solving could be translated into functional code that produced measurable results. I began with simple programming tutorials that I found in library books and early internet resources, working through basic exercises in languages like BASIC and Logo that were designed for educational purposes. The immediate feedback loop of programming appealed to my analytical nature. Either the code worked as intended or it didn't, with clear error messages that guided troubleshooting and improvement efforts. Unlike social situations where success depended on reading subtle cues and managing complex interpersonal dynamics, programming offered a structured environment where persistence and logical thinking consistently produced progress. The learning process was largely self-directed because our school's computer education was limited to basic typing skills and simple word processing applications. The teachers who supervised computer lab time were knowledgeable about educational software, but had little experience with actual programming or systems development. This meant that I had to develop my own curriculum and find my own resources, a process that taught me valuable lessons about independent learning and resource identification that would prove invaluable in my later professional development. The breakthrough moment in my programming education came when I discovered online forums and communities where experienced developers shared knowledge, collaborated on projects, and mentored newcomers who demonstrated genuine interest and commitment to learning. These digital communities operated according to meritocratic principles that were refreshingly different from the social hierarchies I navigated at school and home. Respect and recognition were earned through demonstrated competence and helpful contributions rather than through personality traits or social connections. My first meaningful contribution to these programming communities involved debugging a data sorting algorithm that several forum members had been struggling with for weeks. The problem required understanding both the mathematical logic of efficient sorting methods and the technical implementation details that could cause seemingly correct code to produce incorrect results. After several late nights of analysis and testing, I identified the error and posted a detailed explanation of both the problem and the solution. The response was immediate and gratifying in ways that school achievements had never been. Experienced programmers thanked me for the insight, asked follow-up questions that demonstrated their respect for my analytical abilities, and invited me to collaborate on more complex projects that would expand my skills while contributing to software that other people would actually use. For the first time in my academic experience, I was valued primarily for what I could accomplish rather than for how well I fit into predetermined social roles or expectations. This validation encouraged me to invest even more time and energy in developing programming expertise, but it also taught me valuable lessons about the importance of choosing learning environments where my natural strengths would be appreciated rather than overlooked. The online programming communities rewarded careful analysis, persistent problem-solving, and clear communication about technical concepts, exactly the skills that I had been developing through years of independent study and logical thinking. As my programming abilities advanced, I began to explore applications that might have practical value beyond academic exercises or community problem-solving. The emerging field of web development offered opportunities to create functional websites and online tools that businesses were beginning to recognize as essential for modern commerce and communication. Unlike traditional programming projects that remained theoretical or educational, web development produced tangible results that could be tested, improved, and eventually monetized. My first commercial web development project came through an unexpected connection with Mr. Valdez, who owned a small auto repair shop near our neighborhood and who had heard through Dad's social network that I was interested in computer work. Mr. Valdez needed a simple website that would allow potential customers to learn about his services, see examples of his work, and contact him for appointments or estimates. The project seemed straightforward enough that I could complete it successfully while gaining experience with real-world client requirements and professional web development processes. The initial conversation with Mr. Valdez revealed the significant gap between my technical capabilities and my understanding of business requirements and client communication. He described his needs in general terms that assumed I would know how to translate his vision into specific technical features and design elements. Sofia's display was positioned 2 tables away from mine, and I could see that she had created an impressive visual presentation with colorful charts, professional-looking graphs, and decorative elements that attracted immediate attention from early visitors to the fair. Her natural confidence and communication skills were evident as she began explaining her research findings to the first group of judges, and I felt proud to be related to someone who could present complex information with such ease and sophistication. The judging process involved teams of adults circulating among the displays, spending several minutes at each table to hear presentations and ask questions about methodology, findings, and potential applications. I had practiced my explanation multiple times and felt prepared to demonstrate both the technical aspects of my programming work and the mathematical concepts that made it possible. When the first group of judges approached my table, I launched into my prepared presentation with enthusiasm and confidence, explaining how I had identified the challenge of pattern recognition in number sequences, researched relevant mathematical algorithms, and taught myself enough programming to implement a working solution. The judges seemed impressed by the sophistication of the work and asked detailed questions about my learning process and the potential for expanding the project in future iterations. The live demonstration went exactly as planned, with the program successfully analyzing several number sequences that the judges provided and generating accurate predictions that illustrated the underlying mathematical principles. One judge, who identified himself as a mathematics professor at a local community college, was particularly interested in the algorithmic approaches I had used and suggested that my work showed genuine understanding of concepts that were typically taught at much more advanced levels. As the judges moved on to the next display, I felt satisfied with my presentation and confident that I had effectively communicated both the technical merits of my project and the learning process that had made it possible. The positive feedback had exceeded my expectations, and I was beginning to allow myself to hope that my work might be recognized with some form of award or special mention. The second group of judges included Mrs. Rodriguez and several other adults who were familiar with our family through neighborhood activities and social connections. When they reached my table, I repeated my presentation with the same enthusiasm, but this time I noticed that they seemed distracted and kept glancing toward Sofia's display where animated conversation was clearly taking place. As I concluded my explanation and prepared to demonstrate the program functionality, Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted with a comment that initially confused me. She mentioned that Sofia had shared some fascinating insights about mathematical pattern recognition and computer programming applications during her presentation, topics that seemed somewhat outside the scope of her stated project on color psychology but that demonstrated impressive breadth of knowledge and intellectual curiosity. The confusion deepened when the mathematics professor from the first judging group stopped by Sofia's table and began discussing algorithmic approaches to sequence analysis with obvious excitement and admiration. From my position 2 tables away, I could hear fragments of conversation that sounded remarkably similar to the explanations I had given about my own project, but delivered with Sofia's characteristic confidence and enhanced by her superior presentation skills. The realization of what was happening dawned gradually as I listened to Sofia discussing programming concepts and mathematical principles that I had explained to her the previous evening, now woven seamlessly into her own project presentation. As additional research that demonstrated her intellectual sophistication and multidisciplinary approach to scientific inquiry. She wasn't claiming to have written the computer program herself, but she was presenting the underlying concepts as part of her broader research into human psychology and cognitive processing. The judges were clearly impressed by the apparent depth and sophistication of Sofia's work, praising her for identifying connections between psychological research and mathematical analysis that suggested advanced critical thinking skills and interdisciplinary understanding. Several adults commented on her maturity and intellectual curiosity, noting that her project demonstrated the kind of comprehensive approach to learning that distinguished exceptional students from those who simply completed assignments competently. When the judging concluded and awards were announced, Sofia received first place in the teenage category for her comprehensive research project that successfully integrated multiple fields of study and demonstrated sophisticated understanding of complex concepts. My programming project received an honorable mention in the elementary category, recognition that was appropriate for the work I had actually accomplished, but that felt insufficient given the time and effort I had invested in learning advanced concepts and creating a functional demonstration. The family response to these results followed predictable patterns that reinforced existing dynamics while adding new layers of complexity to my understanding of achievement and recognition. Sofia's first place award was celebrated with enthusiasm and pride, with relatives calling to offer congratulations and neighbors stopping by to praise her intellectual accomplishments and bright future prospects. The award ceremony photos showed Sofia beaming with justified pride while holding her blue ribbon, surrounded by admiring adults who clearly saw her success as confirmation of her exceptional potential. My honorable mention was acknowledged warmly, but briefly, with family members expressing appropriate satisfaction with my participation and effort while clearly viewing my recognition as less significant than Sofia's more prestigious award. The contrast in responses wasn't intentionally hurtful, but it reinforced my growing awareness that achievements were valued differently depending on how they were presented and who was presenting them. The conversation during the family celebration dinner that evening provided the most painful illustration of how thoroughly Sofia had appropriated insights from my work without acknowledging their source. As relatives asked questions about her award-winning project, Sofia described her research process in terms that included detailed explanations of mathematical concepts and programming applications that I had shared with her during our conversation the previous night. When I attempted to mention my own project and the programming work that had generated some of the concepts Sofia was discussing, the family response was polite but dismissive. Several relatives commented that it was wonderful that I was learning about computers and mathematics, but they seemed to assume that my understanding was elementary compared to Sofia's obviously sophisticated grasp of complex interdisciplinary relationships. The most devastating moment came when Dad, beaming with pride about Sofia's achievement, commented that she had clearly inherited the family's intellectual capabilities and that her success demonstrated the value of encouraging bright children to pursue challenging academic projects. The implication was clear: Sofia's award validated her exceptional intelligence and academic potential, while my participation had been a nice learning experience that shouldn't be compared to genuine intellectual achievement. That night, lying in bed and replaying the day's events, I experienced what felt like my first adult understanding of how recognition and achievement actually functioned in the world around me. Sofia hadn't intended to steal my ideas or to minimize my accomplishments, but her natural confidence and superior presentation skills had allowed her to incorporate insights from my work into her own narrative in ways that enhanced her success, while making my contributions invisible. The family's response reflected their genuine love and support for both of us, but it also revealed their unconscious biases towards certain types of achievements and certain ways of presenting intellectual work. Dad's inability to work during recovery would eliminate his income for at least 3 months, creating additional pressure on family finances that were already strained by unexpected medical bills. The conversation continued with Mom explaining that she had spoken with Sofia earlier and that they were exploring various options for managing the financial crisis. Sofia had offered to help coordinate a family loan from relatives and had mentioned the possibility of establishing a fundraising campaign through social media networks to supplement insurance coverage and family contributions. The underlying assumption was that this medical emergency would require collective family effort and creative financial planning to prevent bankruptcy or force difficult decisions about Dad's care. I listened to these explanations while performing mental calculations about my current liquid assets and the practicalities of converting cryptocurrency holdings into immediately available funds for medical expenses. The $40,000 that seemed overwhelming to my family represented less than 2% of my current net worth, an amount that I could provide without significantly affecting my overall financial position or long-term investment strategy. But the offer to cover Dad's medical expenses would require explaining my actual financial capabilities, a revelation that would fundamentally alter family dynamics and create new expectations and pressures that none of us were prepared to handle. The alternative was to contribute modestly while watching my parents struggle with debt and payment plans that would affect their retirement security and quality of life for years to come. The internal conflict was intense and immediate. Every ethical principle and family loyalty instinct demanded that I provide whatever assistance was needed to ensure Dad received optimal medical care without financial stress. But the practical implications of revealing my wealth extended far beyond this immediate crisis and would inevitably affect every future family interaction and decision. After assuring Mom that I would help however possible and arranging to meet the family at the hospital the following morning, I spent the night researching options for converting cryptocurrency assets to cash quickly while minimizing transaction fees and tax implications. The technical process was straightforward for someone with my experience, but the emotional preparation for potential family disclosure was more complex and stressful. The hospital gathering the next morning illustrated all the established family dynamics in their most concentrated form, with Sofia naturally assuming leadership of the crisis management effort while I provided quiet support and practical assistance. She had arrived early to speak with doctors, coordinate with insurance representatives, and begin organizing the financial planning that would be necessary regardless of which treatment options Dad ultimately chose. Sofia's command of the situation was impressive and genuinely helpful as she navigated medical bureaucracy, asked appropriate questions about treatment alternatives, and maintained detailed notes about deadlines and requirements for insurance, authorization and payment arrangements. Her social skills and confidence were perfectly suited for managing the complex interpersonal dynamics involved in coordinating care among multiple medical professionals, administrative staff, and family members. My contributions to the crisis response were more behind the scenes but equally important as I researched treatment facilities, compiled information about recovery timelines and success rates for different surgical approaches, and identified potential complications or additional expenses that might not be covered by standard insurance policies. The analytical work suited my strengths while allowing Sofia to maintain her position as the family's primary advocate and decision-maker. The financial discussion that afternoon brought the underlying tensions to their inevitable breaking point. Sofia had prepared a comprehensive breakdown of anticipated costs, potential funding sources, and payment timeline that demonstrated both her organizational capabilities and her genuine commitment to ensuring Dad received appropriate care. The plan involved contributions from multiple family members, potential loans from relatives with better financial resources, and creative payment arrangements with medical providers that would distribute costs over manageable monthly installments. When Sofia asked about my potential contribution to this collective effort, I found myself in the impossible position of either revealing my true financial capabilities or watching my family struggle with debt that I could easily prevent. The question was straightforward and reasonable given the family emergency, but answering it honestly would require explanations that I wasn't prepared to provide. My initial response was deliberately vague, mentioning that I would help as much as possible while avoiding specific commitments about dollar amounts or payment timelines. Sofia interpreted this hesitation as evidence of financial limitations that prevented me from contributing substantially, a reasonable assumption given her understanding of my modest lifestyle and apparent career circumstances. The conversation that followed was painful and revealing as Sofia attempted to reassure me that modest contributions would be appreciated and that the family would understand if my financial situation prevented significant assistance. Her tone was gentle and supportive, but it also contained subtle condescension that reflected her assumption that I was embarrassed about my inability to help substantially during a family crisis. The breaking point came when Sofia suggested that I might ask for a small personal loan from my employer or consider borrowing against future earnings to contribute $50 toward Dad's medical expenses. The suggestion was meant kindly, reflecting her desire to include me in the family's collective response while acknowledging what she assumed were my financial limitations. But the offer also crystallized everything that was problematic about our family's understanding of my capabilities and circumstances. The idea that I would need to borrow $50 while sitting on nearly $4 million in assets was so absurd that it triggered an emotional response that overwhelmed my usual commitment to privacy and careful boundary management. The months of watching my family struggle with financial stress while I maintained the pretense of limited resources had created accumulated psychological pressure that finally found release in this moment of acute crisis and family need. My response was immediate and probably louder than necessary as I explained that I didn't need to borrow $50 from anyone and that I could cover Dad's entire medical expenses without affecting my own financial security. The statement was intended to address Sofia's specific suggestion, but it inevitably raised questions about the source of resources that would allow such substantial assistance. The family's reaction was immediate confusion followed by skeptical disbelief as they processed information that contradicted everything they understood about my financial circumstances. Sofia's expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and growing awareness that something fundamental about our family dynamics had just been revealed that would require complete reassessment of assumptions that had shaped our relationships for decades. The explanation that followed was necessarily abbreviated given the hospital setting and family crisis context, but it covered the essential elements of my cryptocurrency investments, technology consulting business, and current net worth that positioned me to help substantially with medical expenses while continuing to build long-term wealth through strategic investment activities. I realized that successful web development required not only programming skills but also the ability to ask clarifying questions, manage client expectations, and deliver results that met practical business objectives rather than just technical specifications. The learning curve was steep but manageable because Mr. Valdez was patient and appreciative of my efforts to understand his business and create something genuinely useful for his customers. We worked together through several design iterations, with me creating test versions that he could review and provide feedback on before committing to final implementation. The collaborative process taught me valuable lessons about project management, client relations, and the importance of creating solutions that prioritized user experience over technical complexity. The finished website was modest by professional standards but represented a significant achievement in terms of my development as both a programmer and a business problem solver. Mr. Valdez was delighted with the results and immediately began receiving customer inquiries through the online contact form and appointment scheduling system. More importantly for my future development, he was enthusiastic about recommending my services to other small business owners who needed similar digital solutions. Word-of-mouth marketing proved remarkably effective in generating additional web development opportunities, partly because small business owners in our area had limited options for affordable website creation and partly because my work demonstrated genuine understanding of their practical needs rather than just technical proficiency. Within 6 months, I had completed projects for a local bakery, a house cleaning service, and a freelance accountant, each requiring different approaches to design and functionality but all benefiting from my growing expertise in creating user-friendly business websites. The financial aspects of this web development work were as educational as the technical challenges. Each project required me to estimate the time and effort involved, negotiate fair pricing that reflected both the value provided to clients and the need for me to earn reasonable compensation for skilled work, and manage payment schedules that aligned with project milestones and client cash flow requirements. These early experiences with pricing and financial negotiations taught me fundamental business skills that would prove invaluable in my later investment and consulting activities. More significantly, the web development income represented my first experience with earning substantial money through skills and expertise rather than through traditional employment or allowance arrangements. The psychological impact of this financial independence was profound, providing concrete evidence that my technical abilities had real-world value that could be translated into economic security and future opportunity. Unlike academic achievements that were measured through grades and recognition, these business successes were quantified in dollars that could be saved, invested, and used to fund additional learning and development activities. The decision to save and invest most of my web development earnings rather than spending them on immediate gratification reflected both my natural inclination toward delayed gratification and my growing awareness that money could be a tool for creating additional opportunities rather than just a means for purchasing consumer goods. While my teenage peers were spending their part-time job earnings on clothes, entertainment, and social activities, I was accumulating capital that could be used for more strategic purposes. This approach to money management was influenced by conversations with some of my web development clients, particularly the freelance accountant who had shared insights about tax strategies, business planning, and investment principles during our project collaboration. She had explained how small amounts of money, invested consistently over long periods, could grow into substantial wealth through the power of compound returns and strategic asset allocation. Her advice was the first formal financial education I had received, and it planted seeds that would eventually grow into sophisticated investment expertise. The reading and research that followed these initial conversations about investment and wealth building opened entirely new areas of exploration that connected to my existing interests in mathematics, data analysis, and logical problem solving. Financial markets, I discovered, were complex systems that rewarded careful analysis, pattern recognition, and strategic thinking, exactly the skills that I had been developing through programming and business problem-solving activities. My first serious study of investment principles began with library books about basic personal finance, stock market fundamentals, and wealth-building strategies for young adults. The mathematical aspects of investment analysis appealed to my analytical nature, while the strategic elements reminded me of the systematic approach that had proven successful in programming and web development projects. Unlike social or academic achievements that depended partly on subjective evaluation and interpersonal dynamics, investment success was measured through objective financial returns that reflected the quality of analysis and decision-making. The theoretical learning was supplemented by practical experimentation through online investment simulation platforms that allowed me to test strategies and analysis methods without risking real money. These virtual trading environments provided immediate feedback about the accuracy of my market analysis and the effectiveness of different investment approaches, creating the same kind of educational feedback loop that had accelerated my programming development. The simulation results were encouraging enough to justify moving from theoretical study to actual investment activity, albeit with small amounts of money that represented test cases rather than significant financial commitments. My first real investment was $200 in a diversified mutual fund, chosen based on research about long-term historical performance and expense ratios that would maximize returns while minimizing fees. The psychological experience of owning actual financial assets, even in small amounts, was remarkably different from simulation trading and added emotional dimensions to investment decision-making that couldn't be replicated through theoretical exercises. As my web development business continued to grow and generate consistent income, I established a systematic approach to saving and investing that allocated specific percentages of earnings to different purposes: immediate expenses, emergency fund development, and long-term investment accumulation. This disciplined approach reflected lessons learned from financial education reading and advice from successful clients, but it also aligned with my natural preference for systematic planning and delayed gratification. The investment portfolio grew slowly but steadily through consistent contributions and reinvestment of dividends and capital gains. More importantly, the process of managing these investments provided practical education in market analysis, risk assessment, and strategic planning that complemented my theoretical reading and research. Each investment decision required careful evaluation of available information, consideration of potential risks and rewards, and ongoing monitoring to ensure that performance met expectations and that strategy adjustments were made when circumstances changed. The technology sector attracted particular attention because of my professional expertise in web development and programming, areas that gave me insights into industry trends and company capabilities that might not be apparent to investors without technical backgrounds. My understanding of emerging technologies and digital business models provided advantages in evaluating technology companies and predicting which innovations were likely to gain widespread adoption and commercial success. This sector focus led to my first significant investment success when I identified a small software company that was developing tools for e-commerce businesses, applications that I recognized as addressing real problems that my web development clients frequently encountered. The company's stock price had been depressed due to concerns about competition from larger technology firms, but my analysis suggested that their specialized focus and superior technical execution would allow them to maintain market position and grow revenues as e-commerce adoption accelerated. The investment proved profitable when the company was acquired by a larger corporation that valued their specialized expertise and established customer relationships. The financial return was modest in absolute terms but significant relative to my initial investment, providing both capital gains and valuable validation of my ability to identify undervalued opportunities through technical expertise and market analysis. This success encouraged more ambitious investment strategies and deeper research into emerging technology trends that might create significant opportunities for early investors. The intersection of technology innovation and financial markets represented exactly the kind of analytical challenge that appealed to my problem-solving instincts while offering potential for substantial wealth creation that could provide genuine financial independence. The cryptocurrency research that would eventually reshape my entire financial future began during this period of exploring technology investment opportunities. Bitcoin and other digital currencies were still largely experimental technologies, with limited mainstream adoption, but the underlying blockchain concepts represented innovative approaches to problems that I understood from my programming and web development experience. The technical sophistication required to evaluate cryptocurrency potential meant that most traditional investors were either ignoring digital assets entirely or dismissing them as speculative gambling rather than recognizing their genuine technological and economic innovation. My initial cryptocurrency education involved weeks of intensive reading about cryptographic principles, distributed systems architecture, and digital currency implementation challenges. The technical complexity was significant but manageable given my programming background, while the economic implications required additional study of monetary theory and financial system design that expanded my understanding of how traditional banking and currency systems actually functioned. The more I learned about cryptocurrency technology and potential applications, the more convinced I became that digital assets represented a fundamental innovation that would eventually reshape financial services, business transactions, and wealth storage systems. The early stage of development meant that prices were volatile and adoption was limited, but these same factors created opportunities for substantial returns for investors who could understand the technology and tolerate short-term price fluctuations. While waiting for broader market recognition and institutional adoption, the decision to make my first Bitcoin purchase required careful consideration of both the potential rewards and the genuine risks involved in investing in experimental digital currency. The $500 investment represented a significant portion of my available capital but was small enough that a total loss wouldn't derail my overall financial plans or force me to change my lifestyle in dramatic ways. More importantly, the investment was based on thorough research and technical understanding rather than speculation or emotional decision-making. The psychological experience of owning Bitcoin was unlike any previous investment activity because digital currencies existed only as cryptographic keys and blockchain records rather than as traditional securities or physical assets. Managing cryptocurrency required learning about digital wallets, private key security, and blockchain transaction processes that were completely outside the conventional financial system. The technical complexity provided additional barriers to widespread adoption but also created competitive advantages for investors who took the time to understand and implement proper security and management procedures. As Bitcoin's price began to appreciate and public awareness of cryptocurrency gradually increased, I continued to study the broader digital asset ecosystem and to make strategic investments in other cryptocurrencies that demonstrated technical innovation and potential for real-world application. The portfolio diversification reflected both risk management principles and recognition that the cryptocurrency space was likely to evolve in directions that would benefit multiple digital assets rather than just Bitcoin. The investment success was gratifying but also reinforced important lessons about the value of independent research, technical expertise, and long-term strategic thinking in identifying opportunities that weren't apparent to mainstream investors. The cryptocurrency portfolio growth provided both financial returns and validation of my analytical capabilities, encouraging continued exploration of emerging technologies and unconventional investment opportunities that might offer similar potential for substantial wealth creation. Throughout this period of intensive learning and investment activity, I maintained careful separation between my developing financial expertise and my family relationships, partly to protect my privacy, and partly to avoid creating expectations or pressures that might complicate both my investment decisions and my family dynamics. The success was deeply satisfying on a personal level, but it also represented a form of achievement that would be difficult to explain or share with family members who measured success through more traditional and visible markers. The foundation was being laid for the dramatic wealth accumulation that would eventually place me in a position to help my family substantially while also creating the circumstances that would lead to the confrontation with Sofia and the revelation that would transform our relationship forever. But at this stage, the future implications of my investment strategy remained hidden beneath the surface of what appeared to be modest technical work and quiet academic interest in emerging technologies. The emergency call came on a Thursday evening in March while I was reviewing quarterly reports for my cryptocurrency portfolio and planning strategic adjustments based on recent market developments. Mom's voice carried the particular strain that immediately signals family crisis, the kind of controlled panic that comes from trying to manage catastrophic news while maintaining enough composure to communicate essential information clearly. Dad had collapsed at work that afternoon, she explained through barely controlled tears. The initial diagnosis from the emergency room suggested a mild heart attack, though additional testing would be needed to determine the extent of damage and appropriate treatment protocols. He was stable for now, conscious and responsive, but the cardiologist was recommending immediate surgery to address blocked arteries that posed ongoing risks for future cardiac events. The medical situation was serious but manageable with proper treatment and follow-up care. The financial implications, however, were potentially devastating for a family that had always lived paycheck to paycheck despite decades of steady employment and careful budgeting. Dad's health insurance through the auto shop was basic coverage that would handle emergency treatment costs but leave substantial gaps for specialized procedures, extended recovery time, and the ongoing medications that would be required for long-term heart health management. Mom's breakdown of the anticipated expenses was sobering even for someone with my financial resources. The surgery alone would cost approximately $40,000 after insurance, with additional expenses for rehabilitation, medication, and potential complications that could extend recovery time and increase total costs substantially. The immediate practical result was that Dad's medical expenses were handled without family financial stress or compromise of treatment options. I arranged for direct payment to medical providers that covered surgery, recovery, rehabilitation, and ongoing medication costs, ensuring that his care decisions would be based on medical appropriateness rather than financial constraints. But the longer-term implications of the disclosure were more complex and far-reaching as family members adjusted their understanding of my capabilities, my choices, and my position within family hierarchies that had been established over decades of shared experiences and mutual support. Sofia's initial reaction combined genuine surprise with what appeared to be wounded pride as she processed the revelation that her quiet younger sister had been sitting on resources that exceeded anything she had imagined possible. The discovery that I could have helped with previous family financial stresses but had chosen to maintain privacy about my capabilities created understandable feelings of betrayal and confusion about my motivations and family loyalty. The conversation that took place later that week, after Dad's surgery had been completed successfully and his recovery was proceeding according to medical expectations, provided opportunity for more detailed discussion about my investment activities, business development, and the reasoning behind my decision to maintain privacy about financial success. Sofia's questions were direct and sometimes challenging as she tried to understand how I had developed investment expertise, why I had chosen to keep my success private, and whether my assistance with Dad's medical expenses represented genuine family commitment or guilt-motivated charity that reflected poorly on my previous choices. The explanation required careful balance between honesty about my capabilities and respect for Sofia's feelings and her own sense of family contribution and value. I emphasized that my financial success reflected technical expertise and strategic timing rather than superior character or family commitment, and that her leadership during Dad's medical crisis had been essential regardless of who ultimately paid the bills. The broader family adjustment to this new information unfolded over several months as relatives processed the implications and developed new patterns of interaction that reflected updated understanding of my resources and capabilities. Some family members expressed pride and admiration for my achievement while others seemed uncertain about how to relate to someone whose wealth exceeded their previous experience or understanding. The most significant relationship change involved Sofia and the gradual development of mutual respect that replaced the previous dynamic of assumed hierarchy and differential treatment. As she learned more about my investment strategies and business activities, Sofia began to appreciate the sophistication and long-term planning that had created my financial success, recognition that helped her understand that our different paths had both involved substantial effort and strategic thinking. The professional collaboration that developed between us was unexpected but remarkably productive as Sofia's marketing expertise complemented my technical and financial capabilities in ways that created new opportunities for both of us. Her understanding of client relationships and business development proved valuable for expanding my consulting practice, while my analytical skills and financial resources provided support for her real estate career advancement and professional development. The establishment of our joint charitable foundation focused on financial literacy education for young women represented the culmination of this evolved relationship and demonstrated how family relationships could be strengthened rather than damaged by honest communication about capabilities and mutual support based on complementary strengths rather than assumed roles. Dad's recovery proceeded smoothly without financial stress or compromise of medical care, providing tangible evidence that family crises could be managed effectively when resources were available and applied strategically. More importantly, the experience demonstrated that family relationships could evolve and improve when based on accurate understanding of each member's capabilities and contributions rather than assumptions and established patterns that might not reflect current realities. The psychological relief of no longer maintaining secrecy about financial success was profound and liberating, allowing me to participate more fully in family planning and decision-making while also providing opportunities to share expertise and resources in ways that benefited everyone. The transition from hidden wealth to family transparency created new responsibilities and expectations, but it also enabled more authentic relationships based on mutual respect and genuine understanding of each person's strengths and contributions. Looking back on the journey from that first Bitcoin purchase through the medical crisis revelation, the most significant lesson was that success and wealth creation were possible through careful analysis, strategic planning, and patient execution of long-term investment strategies, but that the value of financial achievement was ultimately measured by its contribution to family security and the opportunity it provided for authentic relationships based on truth rather than assumptions. Sofia and I had both learned important lessons about the different paths to achievement and the importance of recognizing and appreciating diverse forms of success and contribution. Her social skills and professional development represented genuine accomplishments that deserved recognition and celebration, while my technical expertise and investment success provided different but equally valuable capabilities that could benefit our entire family when applied thoughtfully and strategically. The bank withdrawal that had triggered Sofia's dramatic reaction was ultimately less important than the conversations and relationship development that followed, proving that dramatic revelations were most valuable when they led to deeper understanding and stronger connections rather than simply providing moments of vindication or superiority. Our family had emerged from the crisis stronger and more connected, with better understanding of each member's capabilities and more effective communication about needs, resources, and mutual support strategies that would benefit everyone in future challenges and opportunities. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.